It is my distinct honor to introduce another pissed off woman. A partner in every way, one of my own personal heroes. Can you imagine there is a woman in this country that is brave enough and strong enough to lead a major labor organization, Change to Win? I mean, I've been in the labor movement. That takes some doing. The Secretary-Treasurer of the Service Employees International Union, a woman who hasn't stopped moving since she organized her very first walkout, my colleague and friend, Anna Berger.
Thanks, Cecile. And it's true, I am another pissed off woman who's ready to move and ready to act and ready to get stuff done. And I'm proud to be with all of the panelists. I'm especially excited to hear about what Planned Parenthood plans on doing in terms of moving their organization into a kick-butt or kick-ass organization, because that's what we all need to do. And I want to talk a little bit about how we do that in SEIU and what that means in terms of SEIU and how we are your partners in the field so that you understand why we sometimes get a little aggressive because of the way that we think about our work. You know, in 1996, Andy Stern was elected president of SEIU, and we decided that we needed to transform our union, that we needed to grow the voice of working people again, and that we needed to do our politics in a different kind of a way. That politics was really about members and their issues. So we had to be a member-driven organization, a member-driven political program that was tied to the issues, not parties, that we understood that we had permanent issues, not permanent candidates or permanent officials or permanent friends. And that we needed to change that so that we could win health care for every single man, woman, and child in America, so that we could win the voice for workers on the job, so that we could recreate the American dream. And because of that, we now have members who are enthusiastically engaged like never before. They do knock on doors, and they are an incredible grassroots operation. They do raise voluntary political dollars so that we can put our dollars to work. And they are workers who are incredibly good at agitating around issues. And they make me proud because of their determination, because of their leadership, because of their willingness to participate and lead the National Journal so that we were the best grassroots political operation in 2006. And we plan on being better. As active as our members are, however, they are frustrated at what happens or doesn't happen in their cities, in their states, and in their country. Because they knock on doors, they make phone calls, they talk to their coworkers, their neighbors, their family, their friends. They convince people to vote for candidates based on what the candidate says, only to be disappointed that when that candidate becomes an elected official, about what they do. Our members are ordinary people who come together to do extraordinary things. And they expect that when they support candidates, that they should talk the talk, but that they should walk the walk. And so for us, our members are incredibly frustrated when their candidates only talk it and don't walk it. So we decided that we really needed to rebalance our political program, that we needed to think not just about elections, but we needed to think about accountability. And so in 2004 at our convention, we launched an accountability program that will continue to expand. In 2004, we did it by challenging our members and our leaders to nominate or charge an elected official who had done us wrong. And we had Judge Mathis be the judge, and our convention delegates were the jury, and the stage of the trial was the stage of our convention. And based on the overwhelming evidence of the members from Washington State, they were able to prove that a Washington State legislator, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, who had slashed health care, who had slashed unemployment benefits, who had slashed things for working people and education, we found her guilty, and we launched an accountability campaign. So we challenged her in a primary. Her opponent was a long-term community activist, somebody who stood for working people, and she fought hard, but she lost. But she showed elected officials in Washington State that you couldn't take working people for granted. Now, she lost, but we won, because that elected official in Washington State has been much better than ever before, and now I'm happy to say she's announced her retirement. Once was bad enough, she didn't want to do it a second time. And that motivated our members. In the last 4 years, we've made accountability a cornerstone of our political program. We are demanding that the voice of working people be heard. We tell politicians that they have to be accountable to real people, and that we will back that up with concrete action. Now, we know that we can't, just like we can't elect candidates by ourselves, that we can't hold them accountable by ourselves, that we need to work with our families and friends, that we need to work with the Progressive Alliance, the Progressive Movement, to build something that really can have the focus, have the resources, and have the plan. And that's why we helped create and launch They Work for Us. Now, They Work for Us is very simple. It's about educating voters before and after Election Day about what their elected official is doing. It's shining the light on elected officials' behavior in their home district so they can't hide from it, about what they're doing on economic issues that really matter. Because we want to change bad behavior, we want to take them on or take them out. So just ask Congressman Dan Boren from Oklahoma. Now, he's a bad vote for working people. He's a bad vote on health care for kids and the expansion of S-chip. He was a bad vote on Voice for Working People and EFCA. And so we couldn't believe that his voters in Oklahoma really understood what he was doing. So we decided to educate them a little bit. And we ran an ad in his district talking about what he did or didn't do for kids. And guess what? We only ran that ad one little couple days. And Congressman Boren has now pledged to vote for S-chip for kids. So it works. Now, we've changed his behavior once. Let's see if we can change it a whole lot or whether we have to change him. Which kind of takes me to the Donna Edwards Al Wynn. Wasn't that great? We knew we could have somebody better than Al Wynn representing us, and we knew his district deserved it because his district was a progressive district and deserved to have somebody who would stand up and not just vote sometimes, but would lead and speak out and be an advocate for them day in and day out. So we rejected the status quo and we supported Donna Edwards. And we in SEIU knocked on 5,000 doors, made 10,000 phone calls, had 300 people members on Election Day knocking on doors, and we spent about $800,000 on the TV ads, holding out his record and laying out hers. And along with the UFCW and the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters and MoveOn.org and Emily's List and Acorn and Women's Voice, Women's Vote, we all came together and we stood up to the Democratic leadership in the Congress and said, who wanted to protect him, and said, not a chance. We are going to elect a progressive, and we did. And we should be proud of that because we have to do that more. But it's not just about primaries. It's also about taking on challenges in the status quo. We just took on Denny Hastert's seat, right? The Republicans said that they owned that seat. Well, we have to teach a lesson that no one owns a seat. A party doesn't own a seat. A candidate doesn't own a seat. The voters own the seat. And because of the work that we did, we now have Bill Foster, who ran on an economic agenda for working families. So in SEIU, we look at 2008 and the Election Day in terms of how do we get ready now? How do we knock on doors? How do we make phone calls? How are we in the streets? About the issues that matter to working people. To make the candidates understand that they have to stand up for us and vote with us, and that we are out in the streets educating the voters about these candidates and what they really say and what they really do. So next month, SEIU is launching a bus caravan that will go all around this country talking about health care. We will be there to speak up for our heroes and heroines who stand with us, and we will be there to point out the candidates and the members of Congress who don't stand with us in health care. We will take on the Republican nominee, and we'll take on the Democratic nominee, I guess I have to say that too, in terms of what they stand, because we will expose their records. At every single stop, we will ask them, what will they do about health care? Because the truth is, on health care, the American people have spoken. It's time for action, and it's time for accountability, and we will get this done. We also know that we need to recreate the American dream for working families again. So in targeted districts across this country, we will be knocking on doors. We will be talking to voters about workers' right to have a voice on the job and how we can rebuild the American middle class. And we will expose the candidates who support us and those who don't, because we believe that we need to be out there tying the issues to the candidates. And all along the way, whenever we see a candidate or whenever we see an elected official, we will remind them about accountability. Because this election is not about a party, it's not about prestige, it's not about a perk. It's about real people, and it's about time they understand that. So I know that accountability has taken some hard knocks across this country. We can ask the families who have kids in Iraq. We can ask the children who don't have health care because of the lack of expansion of S-chip. Or we can talk to the workers who are losing their homes or facing foreclosures. But I think the reality is that we should be excited because accountability is starting to take hold in places where it matters the most, with voters. Voters want to stand up against the lies and greed in this country. They want candidates who actually do work for them. They're ready to say, are you going to work for us? And hold them accountable to that. And I go around the country a lot, knocking on doors and meeting with my members and helping them campaign and campaigning alongside them. And I hear about change and I hear about accountability, and I see people getting over their cynicism and being willing to believe again that they together can take action and take back our country. And so if voters trust that we can do this together, then we have to be ready to stand up and make sure that the next Congress and the next president delivers for them. This has to be the beginning of our commitment to accountability. We have to make sure that when we win this election, we hold them accountable. And that includes holding our friends accountable and holding the leadership accountable to do what's right, so that they remember what they ran on and that they remember that they work for us, not for K Street. Now, you know they're saying that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, for SEIU, what happens in the field stays in the field. We have a great grassroots political action operation in the field, and they are staying in the field. They are not going home when we win on November 4th. They are staying right there, and they are turning their action into an agitation campaign around the issues that matter. And that's what accountability is all about. It means that we do the same job after Election Day that we do before Election Day, that we talk about the issues and we expose the records and we agitate until we get what we need to get done. Because we are here about reclaiming the American dream for the next generation. We're here because real people matter. And I'm here because people in SEIU matter, and they use their skills, they use their talent, they use their passion to make a difference for themselves, but more importantly for the next generation. They do it because they believe that when they come together, that they can do extraordinary things. And that's why we need to hold them accountable. And I know today that we're going to all march on the White House. We're going to all go down and demonstrate because we need to raise our voices. And so when you do that, I want you to think about somebody who it matters to. And for me, I'll think about Connie Gallagher. Connie Gallagher is a nurse in Iowa, and I door knocked with her in 2006 election, right at the end of October, the beginning of November. We were door knocking together. And she had worked a long shift, and there she was knocking on doors, talking about health care and talking about the war. And as we were knocking, I asked her what motivated her, what made her move and do this. And she said, well, she has a son named James. And she said James was a plumber, and he'd been learning his trade for a number of years, but he still didn't have health care. And James was really worried about that. And one night he came home and he said to his mom, Mom, I joined the National Guard, and now I have health care. And Connie begged him not to do it. And he said, Mom, don't worry. They promised me that they won't ship me off to Iraq. And they did. And he was there for 18 months. And Connie's fortunate. He did come back home alive. But Connie said to me that day that the reason that she was door knocking was because no child should have to go to war because they don't have health care. And Connie continues to knock on doors, and she will continue to fight to bring other people's children home and to make sure all of them have health care. And so we face an incredible challenge, an incredible opportunity when we go down to the Hill to have our voices heard. Because in 2006, a lot of voters, a lot of people we talked to, went to vote because they wanted to bring an end to the war and they wanted to reclaim the middle class. We need to let our officials know that they have a lot of work to do. And I believe that if we stand together, if we stand up, if we speak out, that we can in fact bring our troops home, that we can in fact reclaim the American dream, that we can in fact reclaim our country and change the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, we each have mics, which I think are on. We're sitting on these teetering chairs to just add a little risk to the conversation. And I want to push on some of the fault lines that usually disappear in these discussions when we line up together and do solidarity, which is, it's a little bit about what Deepak said, but it's implicit in Cecile's agenda too. If you look at the war vote, a huge portion of people here and across the country thought that Democrats, once they had a majority, could end the war. And the most progressive speaker in the history of the U.S. House of Representatives did a remarkable job of getting a bill that would get the troops out at a date certain through the House. Reid got it through the Senate by some kind of miracle. They put it on the president's desk, and he vetoed it. At which point the question was, would you just not send any money at all? And there's a whole bunch of progressives across the country who thought, just don't give them any money. And Pelosi's argument, I believe, was she couldn't hold her caucus if she tried to do that, and that it would split. So and you then had the disappointment across the country, the progressive side, we elected you to end this thing and it's still going on. What's happening? So how do progressives deal with this question of pushing but either respecting leadership, or how do you make the decision about accountability in a way that understands their position or decides not to understand it and to push through it? I think these are really hard questions, in fact, once we get a little bit of power. Hopefully less hard when we get more power and bigger majorities, but still real questions. And it also goes to the splits in the issue agenda. Choice divides Democrats. Immigrants and the immigrants question is going to be one of the fault lines that Republicans are going to try to use in districts. And you can hear the Democratic Congressional Committee telling Democratic candidates, be cautious about what you're saying on this. How do you, either in your organization or as a progressive activist, weigh in this kind of tension when you think about holding people accountable, which we surely must do? Anyone? I would sort of like you to mix it up with each other.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead, Cecile.
That's all right. Anna looks like she was ready.
Yeah, I think that this is about accountability. And I think, I've said to Nancy Pelosi and other members of the leadership team that I think things like they work for us in terms of turning up the heat in the field is something that we're like their best friend. If they want to get a progressive agenda through, having an accountability system in the field where we actually have members of the community knocking on doors, raising the issues, agitating around something is really important. If you think about what we did last summer in Americans Against the Escalation of the War, we did Iraqi Summer, where we had in targeted districts, obviously we didn't win them all, but we moved some. We turned up the heat and did continual following of shadowing of candidates. I mean, the reason that Mitch McConnell is going to have a race this time is because he was so beaten up in his home district about the war. Now, will he probably win? Maybe. But he's going to have to spend a whole lot of money in his own home state of Kentucky as opposed to other places. But I think, though, that if we are in the streets, if we are unified around our issues, and I'm fortunate, my union, we're pro-choice, we're anti-war, we're pro-immigrant, we're pro-working families agenda, so we're out there on all the issues. But we need to agitate. We need to keep in the field. We need to expose records, and we shouldn't back down.
Well, I think, so I'll be more conservative and say...
Oh, no, Cecile.
Well, are we supposed to mix it up? We're supposed to sort of disagree with each other? No, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with Anna. I just think that, look, these are hard issues. So I think that we got to do sometimes things that, not just things that make us feel good, but things that actually get what we need to get done. And so I just think it's, as a progressive movement, we just got to be more sophisticated than probably we have been. And that's one of the things about, it's one thing to take pot shots at everybody in power. It's another thing to actually say, we're ready to govern, because that's a lot more complicated. David Bonior can tell us more about that than probably anybody. And I do think Nancy Pelosi is the most progressive speaker of the House that we'll certainly see in my lifetime. And when she says she can't hold her caucus, she probably knows that fact. But I think it does mean we're always going to have a left flank that's out there agitating and organizing. And I think to the extent we're pushing people to the limit, we got to be ready and bring the troops to support them. It's I think sometimes as progressives, we just think people should do things just because it's the right thing to do, and it's just not how politics works. I think we've got to be able to back it up with folks and with organizing. And that's why I think what everyone said is really critical, that it's not election day is just it's just a moment in time. What really matters is what we can bring after election day.
Bob, you raised a really difficult question. And let me just give you my thoughts on it. I was of the view, as was John Edwards during this whole debate, as you recall, that we should keep sending George Bush back a bill time after time after time. I have the highest regard for Nancy Pelosi. She's a dear friend and great leader, and for the leaders in the Senate as well. But I think we made a mistake. And it's easier for me to say that now that I'm not in the leadership anymore, but I do think we did. If you look at the polling numbers nationally, they dipped enormously when the Democrats did not deliver on the war issue, and when they weren't seen fighting as hard as they could. There are some issues, not every issue, but there are some issues where leadership has to stand its ground, even if it has to take a numerical defeat on the floor of the House or the Senate. That was one of them, in my humble opinion. And you know, 5 years ago, Jim McDermott and a colleague of mine from California and myself went to Iraq in October, 6 months before the war, to try to stop it. 3 of us were Vietnam-era veterans. And it was not an easy thing to do. We were vilified not only by the right and the center, but by the left as well for going. But we saw what was coming. We lived the experience of the Vietnam War. And this was an important point in our country. I'm talking now about what transpired in the Congress over this last year on this war. We cannot afford to be in Iraq for another 4 more years. We have to get out. We have to get out in a reasonable, thoughtful way without endangering the troops that are there, but we have to leave. And for those who are suggesting that we're there for 100 years or for another 5 or 6 years, that is not acceptable. That is disaster for the progressive movement. And we have, as Anna said, have to make those people who buck the leadership accountable. That's where the pressure needs to be.
Yeah,
and the
right.
problem we face right now on the war issue, and I'll be quiet because I don't want to I'm eating up too much time. The problem we face here on the war issue is that the sacrifices are being made by only a few in this country. In Vietnam, everybody, most people, often were on the line. And we've got to bring the heat to make people respond in a, not only a progressive, but a decent and humane way. And we haven't done that, and we need to do it.
Well, look, I strongly agree with Anna that accountability is the name of the game, and that if we don't use the time this year to define an issue environment on health care, on immigrant rights, on economic justice, on all these issues, then we will not have set the stage for the kind of public conversation that we need to have next year. I also think we just have to recognize that there's a complicated relationship between outside organizations and movements and people in power. And I think one of the difficulties this last period is that people in power have not seen themselves as having enough responsibility to help build the power on the outside. So something like the Employee Free Choice Act is a perfect example, right? So if I was thinking, how do I build a constituency for the long term that can make America really progressive? That goes on the top of the list, not number 10 or 15. If I'm thinking about how do I embrace a new voting bloc that's going to be a big part of progressive victory for 20 and 30 years down the line, I think I want those 12 million undocumented immigrants and people who are waiting for their loved ones to come over to see the Democratic Party as the one that has brought legalization and justice to bear in the debate. But that's a way of thinking about how to build a broader coalition, how to build a broader base of power that I think we don't often enough see. And I do think you're correct. It's going to be a challenge to think about how to bring the outside and the inside together in a constructive and mutually reinforcing way. And I think it's going to require some shifts on both sides of that ledger. But the outside should never be afraid of accountability, because without accountability, we are fully capable of seeing neoliberal economic policies and a race to the bottom. We've seen it before. We have the evidence. It's not like NAFTA and welfare reform and the crime bill were a century ago. They were 10 years ago. So it's up to us to make sure that doesn't happen again.
if we're going to build a progressive movement that can actually govern for, in Cecile's formulation, for 24 years, I don't know where you got 24 from, but that was pretty good.
By then I'm in a nursing home. That's what it was. So it's like, you know.
But for a generation, and does reforms over a generation, we obviously need leaders that are accountable to an independent movement. But I think the thing I was trying to push for in the first question, I want to try to make another run at it, don't we have to have a governing consciousness that's different than a protest consciousness? That is, not just a sense of we're going to offer, Van Jones suggested we got to offer, we're moving to offer solutions, not just problems, but a greater sophistication about strategy to build our allies, about what we can get done and what we're prepared to see as the, okay, now we got to build again to get to the next stage and push them on that, that we have a more of a staged sense rather than a sense that if we can just take this, we win, and if we don't win, then they've betrayed us. I mean, there is, it seems to me, on our side, a different kind of consciousness that comes with power that we need to have, as well as the leadership's needing to demand that the leadership understand we're going to keep the heat on them, and we're not going to allow what happened the last time we had a Democratic president.
Well, I guess going back to that television, so I'd say, who's this us Kimosabe? So I think our power derives not from proximity to elected officials who have power, but from our ability to actually move a local base in local places that holds them accountable. So if we're shrinking on the ground, or we're not exercising real political power and putting pressure on, as Anna was saying, then we can't really hope for the kind of power relationship that's reciprocal and the kind that you're suggesting. If we can demonstrate that level of power and influence and growth and energy, then we have a right to demand a reciprocal relationship where that kind of adult conversation can happen about, okay, what is the staging of the different things we're going to get done, and what is good enough? But that has to happen in a context of power, not in a context of weakness or supplication.
I think that I know what you're talking about, and I don't think it's an easy answer, but is a governing conscience is a different thing. I think we've done a pretty good job in the progressive movement of pulling together before the election. I mean, for many of us and many of the people in this room, the last 6 years have been spent trying to get our act together so that we're not just 1,000 flowers blooming. We got to now do that on the other side as well, because I think I think the right was very successful in doing this, of sort of coming together and not leaving anybody off the bus, but saying, okay, these are the things we're going to really push for together, so that we're clear with folks, not that we're too close to them, but that we're clear to them about this is it. This is it. So it is healthcare access for every single American. And I think that that's the opportunity we have now, and that's work we got to do, because you're right, we can't squander another 8 years, another 12 years by it being everybody, on their own ship, trying their own thing. And that's just a level of sophistication I think we haven't had, and frankly, an opportunity we haven't had for a while.
And I'd say that through America Votes and other organizations, we've come together to figure out how we can more strategically door knock and elect people. We haven't come together post-election to really think about how do we move our agenda together, and how do we understand that we have one agenda and it's a common agenda that we can move. And I do know, I understand, I am an agitator, but I also believe in making progress. So this isn't trying to figure out how to get the perfect done tomorrow. The challenge is how do we make progress? And how do we really move this forward? But I just want to tie into the accountability again. I think that for too long we had too many candidates who were thinking about their election and not about how we were electing a progressive majority. And that if we were really thinking about this election, which I think most of us are now, in terms of how do we make November 2008 about electing a progressive majority, it changes what we can do, because we really would have the votes in a much broader way, and it's around a progressive agenda. So I would say that if we can figure out how we sit down post-election to figure out how we collaborate on the issues, how we also expect to be at the table, strategizing, that this isn't something that Congress does by themselves, this is something that they do in cooperation and collaboration with us at the table about how we move it forward. But I do think that we have to move things, we have to look at it through the lens of, is this progress? not as if, is this perfect?
I would agree, but also I would add to that that political folks in the Congress or in the state legislatures, assemblies, by nature are cautious. They're cautious individuals. I mean, if they have a choice between something bold and a baby step, they'll go baby step. That's generally the mindset of political people. We have a unique opportunity, I hope, I think, coming up before us to be bold and to take advantage of the time that we are in. This is a unique time. They have taken apart the right, what the New Deal and the progressives put together since FDR. They've pretty well dismantled a good part of what we did, okay? And this recession we're in, for instance, Harold Meyerson speaks very well of this. It's going to take more than just what we've done in the past on recessions. That's going to take some really major structural changes in the economy, some bold thinking. And the country, believe me, is ready for that. And they're ready for major decisions on universal health care. They're ready for the whole new green energy economy. They're ready for empowering workers. And speaking of strategies, I mean, we have been working on, I haven't actually been on a campaign, but I know American Rights at Work has been working with many folks in this room here on a strategy to get us to 60 votes in the Senate, okay, to get the Employee Free Choice Act passed. And that's been going on for a while now. And we're thinking about that. We're thinking about how the accountability piece applies to individual senators, because basically that's what we're talking about here. We're going to get it passed in the House, and how to get that done. We cannot be timid in this next year, year and a half. It's going to provide us an enormous opportunity, assuming the elections go in a progressive manner, to get a lot done. It's going to be hard. The Employee Free Choice Act, for those of you who don't remember, we've been trying to get this done since Taft-Hartley. We failed in the 60s because we made a decision back in the 1960s that we were going to do the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. All that came first, and it was Walter Reuther who said basically back then, that's more important. Great labor leader, okay? So we didn't get it done. We used up all of our capital. Then when Carter became president, we didn't get it done because we couldn't get the 2 senators out of Georgia. We were 2 votes shy of getting labor law reform passed. And the same thing happened under Clinton. He couldn't get the 2 senators out of Arkansas. Now that's not accountability. Yeah. And we have to make sure whoever is sitting in that White House understands how damn important this is, and that they are going to be held accountable, and that we're not going to settle for baby steps. Because the time is running out on a lot of people in this country, and we need some bold leadership to step up and take care of these things.
So I promised you each last words. This is the last session for what's been an extraordinary conference. Here are 1,000 activists. Last words, if beyond what David just told us?
It's pretty sweet.
Leave it at that.
Be bold.